ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Please join me. Ya ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la.
Words are lie, lie, lie.
Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Lie, 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 ya lie, 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 ya lie, 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 ya lie, 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 ya lie, 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 lie.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
I was this close to believing that we were going to have a white Shabbat. But alas, we may have to wait a few more weeks for that to happen. It's good to see you all. Welcome. We are here to both greet the Sabbath, but also to celebrate a new arrival to the community, which we'll be doing in a bit. We are going right now, though, to start with the lighting of Shabbat candles. You can find the blessing on page 120 of the Siddur, the prayer book, which, if you haven't located it yet, is oddly under the seat in front of you. Maybe not oddly, it seems odd to me. And I'd like to invite an aunt and grandmother, Sarah and Janet Padway, to come forward to help us light the candles. You may want to get an assist. Please join us. Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Thank you. We're going to continue with the singing of L'chu Naranana on page 130. It's one of the psalms we utilize when we welcome the Sabbath.
L'chu neranena, l'chu neranena, l'chu neranena l'Adonai. L'chu neranena, l'chu neranena, l'chu neranena l'Adonai. Naria, naria letzur yishenu, nekad mafana betodah. Naria, naria letzur yishenu, bismirot naria lo. L'chu neranena, l'chu neranena, l'chu neranena l'Adonai. L'chu neranena, l'chu neranena, l'chu neranena neranena l'Adonai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai.
And on page 138 is Lecha Dodi. It's a 16th century poem that a community of mystics living on the top of a mountain in Tzfat in Israel used to get dressed in white flowing gowns on Friday afternoon, and as the sun was setting, they would go out into the fields and would sing and sing and sing in order to welcome Shabbat. We are going to, as we customarily do, sing the first, second, fifth, and ninth stanza. And when we reach the ninth stanza, we'll invite you, if you're feeling up to it, to join us in standing and facing the door so that we can kind of symbolically welcome the spirit of the Sabbath.
Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor vezachor bedibur echad yishmianu el hamiyuchad. Kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha ki mekor habracha merosh mikedem nesucha. סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Boi v'shalom ateret bala. Am besimcha lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela.
Please remain standing as we turn to page 144, where we've reached the Chatzi Kaddish, the Reader's Kaddish, a portal of sorts that will allow us to pass from these introductory sections into the main body of the service.
יתגדל בקדש שמי רבה.
אמן.
ויעמד ברכרותיה וימליך מלכותיה בחייכון וביומייכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל Pakala, ובזמן קריב הימרו, אמן. יהי שמירה במברך, לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה, יתברך. יתברך וישתבח, ופאר ורומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה ברכו, לעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה. תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמא ויאמרו, אמן.
Page 146.
Yai la 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 la. Yai la 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 la. Yai la 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 la. Yai la 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 la. Yai la 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 la. Yai la 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 la. Yai la 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 la. Yai la 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 la. Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach.
The prayer we just sang is, in a sense, a call to worship, an invitation from the cantor for us to pray along. And there follows, both in the evening and morning services, a prayer thanking God for the miracle of nature. And the translation of the evening version is on page 148, and I invite you to join with me in praying together. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzevaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on the evening. Baruch atah Adonai, hamariv aravim. Page 150.
Yom אהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד.
Please be seated. And we continue with the Via Hafta, which is on page 154, verses that actually directly follow after the Shema in the book of Deuteronomy. And while the Shema itself is a statement of faith about the uniqueness, the oneness of God, the Via Hafta is sort of a curriculum for how you ought to live if you buy into the idea stated in the Shema. So please join us. We'll be on page 154, chanting to the Torah trope for Shabbat.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
Let's continue together in the middle of page 157. In a world torn by violence and pain, a world far from wholeness and peace, give us the courage to say, Adonai,
there is one God in heaven and earth. The high heavens declare your glory. May earth reveal your justice and love. From bondage in Egypt we were delivered. At Sinai we bound ourselves to your way. Inspired by prophets and instructed by sages, time and again we overcame oppressive forces. Though our failings are many and our faults are great, it has been our glory to bear witness to our God, keeping alive in dark ages your vision of a world redeemed. Let us continue to work for the day when the nations will be one and at peace. Then shall we rejoice as Israel did, singing on the shores of the sea.
Page 158.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקע ים לפני משה ומרים, זה לי ענו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר כי יפאר אדוני את יעקב וגואלו מיד חזק ממנו, Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael.
We continue on page 160 together. Grant, O God, that we lie down in peace, and raise us up, our guardian, to life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Guide us with your good counsel. For your name's sake, be our help. Shield and shelter us beneath the shadow of your wings. Defend us against enemies, illness, war, famine, and sorrow. Distance us from wrongdoing. For you, God, watch over us and deliver us. For you, God, are gracious and merciful. Guard our going and coming to life and peace evermore. Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over your people, and over Jerusalem. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, v'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Page 162.
V'shameru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, לדורותם ברית עולם, ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש.
On page 164, we've arrived in the moment in this service for the Tefillah. Tefillah literally means prayer, and this section is called that because this is really where a lot of significant prayers are found. It's also referred to at times as the Amidah, which means standing, because it is said while standing. So if you're comfortable doing so, please stand and join us on page 164 and following.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu ve'imoteinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Komel Chasadim Tovim, ve'Konei Hakol, ve'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומדבר לעשות הכל. ברוך אתה, אדוני, מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה, אדוני, האל הקדוש.
Please be seated. And let's continue together at the top of page 173. We'll be continuing for the next three prayers at the top of the left-hand side of the page, so you'll see the pattern in a moment. But please join me. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day.
May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat.
And on 175. Ever-present one,
may we, your people Israel, be worthy in our deeds and our prayers. Wherever we live, wherever we seek you, in this land, in Zion restored, in all lands, you are our God, whom alone we serve in reverence. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otcha levadcha b'yirah na'avod.
And on 177 together. God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life,
wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha u'lecha na'eh lehodot.
We continue with the prayer for peace, Shalom Rav, on page 178.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Ki atah hu melech adon lechol Shalom, ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. V'tov b'einecha levarech et amecha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Tasim leolam. Tasim leolam.
Baruch atah Adonai havarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom. Blessed are you, Adonai. You bless your people Israel, and God willing, all people everywhere with peace. With hopes for a world of peace, we continue our prayers silently.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו, ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו
On page 371 of the Siddur, you will find a modern setting for the traditional prayer, the traditional Mishaberach for healing. It is a prayer that asks God to provide for our friends and loved ones, Rifuah Shlema, complete healing, both of the body and of the soul. They may have lived long before there were CAT scans and MRIs, but they understood intuitively that the soul and the body were inextricably connected. And so to experience illness in one realm was also to suffer a little bit in the other as well. So we include both in our prayers. We think especially this Shabbat of all those who remain as hostages in Israel, in Gaza, all those who have been wounded in the conflict there, as well as in Europe and everywhere else there is warfare abounding. We think particularly of Lucy Adams, Elise Barr, Sarah Bat Vesi Veben, Rivka Fegi Bat Phyllis, Emily Baer, Kevin Boland, Yosef Carrasco, Katie Pells Davis, Michelle Delao, Roz Flegel, Leonore Friedman, Susie Garrison, Marianne Gehrig, David Goldenholtz, Thelma Henry, Penny Houle, Jennifer Houston, Michelle Jacoby, Pat Kester, Rory Langlois, Jim and Karen McDermott, Kathy Manchero, Donald Metzke, Bob Bradkey, Mosi Ramirez, Bill, Martha, Michael, and Sally Ross, Dan Ruderman, Stella Schneider, Gary Siegel, Herb Selden, Michael Stillman, Will Thompson, Deidre Tischberg, Makana Chaya Bat Meir Ve Shulamit, and Elizabeth Colt. And if there are others of whom you are aware who could use our blessing for healing, I would ask you to hold them close to you in your heart as together we pray.
שפרח אבותינו מכל הברכה לאמותינו. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mi sheperach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Shabbat is a wonderful time of the week for all sorts of reasons, not the least of which is we're supposed to rest a bit in any way we can figure out how to achieve that. It's also a time we welcome new members, newly born members of the community. And this Shabbat we get to welcome Wes McGrath Padway. So I'd like to ask Wes, along with Ethan and Caroline, his parents, to come forward. And Sarah, did you distribute the copies? Is there anyone who could lend one to me? No, you need that, actually. Oh, thank you. So far, so good. Okay. It is a great privilege to be at the arrival, the birth of a newborn, and also quite a privilege to be here when he wakes up, and to have the opportunity to share with him, to bestow upon him a name, in addition to Wes McGrath Padway, a name that is in Hebrew, one that will not come up every day in his life, but at moments, ritual moments in the Jewish world, this is a name that comes forward. It's often a name, very often, a name that is given in part in memory of people who have come before in the family. And so it expresses a lot of hope, joy, and anticipation that perhaps something about the people after whom Wes is named will somehow mysteriously impart upon him some of the most wonderful qualities they had when they were here on earth. So I'm going to ask the following. Why don't we start over here where it says parents?
O God, we give thanks to you for the gift of our child, who today enters into the covenant of our people. Keep him from all harm, and grant that he may be a source of joy to us and to all his dear ones. Be with us and give us health and length of our days. Teach us to rear him with care and affection, with wisdom and understanding, that he may be a faithful child of our people and a blessing to the world. We give thanks to you, O Lord of life.
Thank you. And yeah, why don't you, you can alternate these too.
As you startle to the world around you, so may you remain ever open, both to the happiness and the pain of those you encounter in the world.
As you cry for food and comfort now, so may you someday cry out to correct the injustices of the world, to help clothe the naked and feed the hungry.
As your hand tightly grasps my fingers,
Actually, your mother's fingers.
so may you grasp hold of learning and grow in knowledge and wisdom.
The name that Caroline and Ethan chose for Wes in Hebrew is Maor Bechor Ben Eitan v'Caroline. I want to say a word just about the meaning of those names in Hebrew, sort of the generic meanings of them, and then I'll turn to the two of you to talk about the people for whom he's being named. Maor literally means a source of illumination. Or means light. Maor is something that produces light. The word Bechor actually means firstborn in Hebrew, which I think is kind of appropriate as well. And Eitan is, Ethan, your name in Hebrew, and Caroline is, that's your name in every language.
That's right.
If you would take a word and say a word about the people after whom.
Maor in Hebrew means luminary or light giver. We chose Maor to honor the memories of my grandfathers, Milton Padway and Marvin Goldberg.
Behor in Hebrew means firstborn. We chose Behor to honor the memories of my Aunt Bonnie and Uncle Bill McCormick.
My grandpa Milt and my Zadie Marvin each put their lives on hold in the 1940s to enlist in the Army and liberate Europe from the fascist threat. Marv enlisted after high school and flew B-17 bombers in Europe. When he returned, he settled down in Chicago, where he dedicated his life to his children and then his grandchildren, indulging us in the Chicago museums and then the Kennedy Space Center after moving to Florida. Even in his older years, my Zadie never forgot to care for his community. He was driving, probably long after he should have been, to deliver Meals on Wheels to connect with those isolated in his community. My Grandpa Milt did not let any obstacle derail him. His Olympic pole vaulting dreams were dashed by the outset of World War II in Europe, so he attended law school. Then the U.S. entered, so he enlisted after graduating in 1942. His secret mission over the Pyrenees that he spent years training for was canceled. No problem, so the Army put his law school degree to use, overseeing civilian contracts to prepare for the war effort. Milt's persistence continued the rest of his life whenever he encountered a challenge, but throughout that time he never forgot to enjoy life and laugh, always quick to pull a practical joke to lighten up the room or jump headfirst into an adventure.
My Aunt Bonnie was my dad's older sister by 15 years. After my paternal grandparents passed away when I was young, my Aunt Bonnie and her husband Bill took on the role of surrogate grandparents to me and my siblings, as they never had grandchildren of their own. There was no Bonnie without Bill, and they never missed a school function, sporting event, or birthday party, turning even a small milestone into a magical memory. And for each accomplishment, Bonnie and Bill would reward us with a $1 bill for a job well done, which was worth a bit more back in the day. Bonnie and Bill exuded love, generosity, and kindness to anyone they met, family, friends, or strangers. After raising 2 children of their own and entering retirement, they spent their time serving at the local food shelter, volunteering at their church, all while going above and beyond to show up for all of their family. Everyone was welcome at their table, and we hope to instill that sense of inclusivity and acceptance in Wes.
Marvin, Milton, Bill, and Bonnie all cared deeply for their family and the community around them. We hope you take their memory and use it to build your community around you.
Wes, we wish you to emulate Marvin, Milton, Bonnie, and Bill, and be a guiding light and a source of joy for all you encounter, lifting others up while fighting for justice in the world.
I think he agrees. It's depending on how we do it. The cantor and I are going to take a moment to ask God to pronounce a blessing on Wes, and this is it.
Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha.
May the Lord bless you and keep you.
Yair Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka.
May the light of life shine upon you and be gracious to you.
Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
May God's face be lifted up to you, Wes, and may God bless you with a long, happy, and healthy life, a life filled with a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose. Above all, a life filled with a sense of peace. Kenya hi ratzon, may it be God's will, and together we can say, Amen.
Amen.
Very good. At the bottom, actually there's a blessing there for grandparents. So if you are a grandparent or perhaps a great aunt, or an aunt, your choice. If you would project, you could even stand if you're not too, okay. And where it says all, we can all do it. You ready? May we get to share in the joy of seeing Wes grow to be an adult, a blessing to our family, our people, and to all the world. And please join us in the Shehechianu, the blessing for the most joyous moments of life.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higyanu lazman hazeh.
Blessed are you, Lord, ruler of the universe, who has given us life, sustained us, and enabled us to be here to celebrate this moment together. Mazel tov. Very high marks. Well done. At the end of the summer, I began to notice a similar figure or image in my dreams. And I don't really remember my dreams very often, but at the end of the summer, I kept on seeing like a fire hose, just gushing water. And I worked for a time here, our retired rabbi who died at 96 a few years ago, Jay Brickman, was an interpreter of dreams, but he's not here anymore, so I couldn't ask him. And this past week, I realized what was going on. Metaphorically, that stream of water bursting forth from the fire hose was the news. Every day, more and more information coming out as we got closer to the election. Just heaps and heaps and heaps of water and occasionally other things coming at us. So when the election came, I thought, this is great because we can turn down the water pressure. The election's over. We have sort of a little bit of a lull between now and the inauguration. And take a deep breath, and boy, was I wrong. Because the water, suddenly there were two hoses being aimed at unloading this past week with all of the different nominations for cabinet level positions. I don't want to talk about that. What I do want to talk about tonight, however, is one issue that's coming into focus that has always been a concern for Jews in the United States, but seems to be coming back to a more acute level of importance. And that is the First Amendment's provisions for the freedom of religion. The two different clauses, the Establishment Clause, which says the country cannot establish a certain religion, cannot endorse a certain religion above others, and the Free Exercise Clause, which says that everybody should have the right to practice the religion the way they want to. And frankly, part of the story of American Jews' success in this country has to do with the fact that there was ingrained in the constitutional mindset this idea that unlike back in England, where religion became a bit of a divisive issue, we didn't want to get there. We wanted to structurally avoid it. Now, the fact of the matter is, it was a little difficult. You may recall, for those of you that studied this at one point in life, that it says that the Congress shall not establish a law respecting, shall not establish, what is the word? Now I forget it now. Respecting the establishment of a state religion. And it turns out that that word, respecting, was not in the original draft. But they ran into a problem which has sort of faded in history, which is the fact that of the original states of the Union, there were several that did have official state religions. For example, Maryland, which was predominantly Catholic. Other states were much more egalitarian in their expectations. But things were almost as complicated back then as they are today. However, Things are pressing and getting a bit worrisome from my perspective. I grew up in the 1960s. I recall the paper trail of jurisprudence of Supreme Court decisions and holdings that provided that religious life and emblems shouldn't be given a space necessarily in the public way, for example. A whole bunch of different things that, football coaches weren't supposed to be leading prayers, a particular sectarian prayer at the end of a game, if it was done in a way that had a coercive effect on some of the players who would be thinking, well, if I want to be in this guy's good graces, I better join in. These were all things that were dealt with at one point in time. And yet, as the saying, what goes around comes around, we're facing some of those yet again. And the truth of the matter is we're not really entirely sure where Donald Trump is on this sort of thing. We don't know really with any certainty where he is on any given issue because his guiding star appears to be an enlightened self-interest, a calculation, an expedient calculation as to what is in any given situation going to be ultimately to his benefit, more so than a consideration for the country's benefit. And I offer that not as a political critique, but rather just sort of what seems to be the case. You never know which Donald Trump is going to show up. Thomas Friedman wrote an op-ed a couple of days ago that said, it's a bit of a challenge to know for sure whether Donald Trump's return to the presidency will bring with it the end of U.S. pressure on Israelis and Palestinians to reach a two-state solution, or we don't know. Mike Huckabee, he's asked to be the, ambassador to Israel. Mike Huckabee is not a fan of a two-state solution. Mike Huckabee comes from an evangelical background, and he feels that Israel has every right to annex the West Bank. He would probably go as far to say as Gaza. It's not clear if Trump will side with that point of view, or the Trump who, with his son-in-law Jared Kushner, crafted and released the most detailed plan for a two-state solution since Bill Clinton's administration. This is something that really got lost in the sauce over the past years. That we know that Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. We know that Trump did other things that some people in Israel thought was very, very, very helpful. But he also put forth a plan for coexistence that ended up not being taken up, but he was able to get the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia to a place where they were willing to deal with Israel as something other than an object of annihilation. And they all had as a condition, we'd like to make peace with Israel, they just got to deal with the Palestinian issue in a humane way. And so that is on hold right now. You are familiar, I would imagine, from the news with Project 2025. It has a lot to do with the establishment of religion in public spaces. And really, some people have said it's even not even a backdoor, it's a front door plan to establish a white Christian cultural polity here in the United States to the exclusion of others. So I'm going to put the state of Texas aside because, who wants to go there first? But you may have heard recently about the state superintendent of public instruction in Oklahoma, a fellow named Ryan Walters, who emailed all the superintendents in Oklahoma and ordered them to show a video to students and send to their parents. And the video was the entire prayer for the nation. Walters blamed the radical left and woke teacher unions for attacking religious liberty and then proceeded to deliver a very heartfelt prayer supporting President-elect Trump. And in so doing, Walters, from the video screen, encourages the students to join into the prayer. In fact, Walters has mandated that all students in Oklahoma public schools view his video and give witness to it, I suppose is the way to put it. Despite protestations prior to the election, it seems that this business with Operation or Project 2025 was a little more central to plans than were revealed. Matt Walsh, who is a bit of a provocateur on the right, was quoted saying this past week, "Well, now that the election is over, I think we can finally say that, yeah, actually Project 2025 is the agenda." Who would have suspected? Back to the great state of Texas, where some interesting things are happening in this regard. Instituting school prayer, or shall I say, reinstituting school prayer. How many people here went to a school where there was compulsory prayer in the morning? You don't count. You do have a national church in England, so it's not to be compared. I can understand. One has to be of a certain vintage in order to remember a time, but I remember a time where that happened. It wasn't just the Pledge of Allegiance, but there were actually sometimes prayers offered as well. But that stopped very early on in the 60s. The problem with establishing prayer, I mean, how many facets could there be to the problem? What is it that people are going to say? Who is going to lead the prayers? Not all teachers, administrators, or students for that matter are Christian, and not all Christians approve of such triumphalism in the classroom. The state of Oklahoma wanted very much to mandate that there be a Bible and Bible instruction in every classroom. Which Bible? Well, it does have red, white, and blue on the front. I mean, it does, there's some context there. But yes, Trump's Bible, which I have not, I have to be honest with you, I haven't looked at it. I don't know whether it is more similar to a Protestant Bible or a Catholic Bible. But the canon of books in those two Bibles is somewhat different. Just as the numbering of the Ten Commandments is, I wouldn't say it's in dispute, but Catholics and Jews do it one way, Protestants do it another way. And every time that I hear, it's the same content, it's just a question of where you end one sentence and start the next. Every time I hear people say we want to put up the Ten Commandments in courthouses, in schools, etc., I always say, yeah, but who's going to decide which version of it? I've had people say to me, people who have had the privilege of being at the Supreme Court in the United States, it says, well, the Ten Commandments are up there in the frieze above towards the ceiling, and that is true, but it's not the only thing there. There are representations of a number of world religions, and in the aggregate seem to be saying, we recognize that some of these values and some of these expectations have long legs and come from places far in front of us, but that's a very different message than just having one represented. Back in Texas, this will probably be news to most of you. Efforts are being made to incorporate Bible stories into the curriculum. Now, one could certainly imagine the story of Noah being an appropriate place to discuss mathematics and multiplication. But there happens to be a lot of enthusiasm using, for teaching purposes, the story of Queen Esther. Queen Esther, the scroll of Esther, the story of Purim, the Persian Jewish community threatened in several hundred years before the Common Era. And Esther, it turns out, happens to be Jewish. The king is somewhat hoodwinked by one of his top advisors into setting out plans to get rid of the Jews. And the end of the story, Esther has to go to the king and say, honey, we have a problem. And the end of the story is that the Jews are saved. And like most Jewish holidays, it's they tried to kill us, we survived, let's eat. A paradigm that carries on. However, that's not what's going on evidently here. The curriculum is called the Blue Bonnet Learning Curriculum. It was developed by the Texas Education Agency. And it made headlines last spring when it was introduced for public feedback. It drew criticism immediately from prioritizing Christianity at the expense of other religions, including some things about Judaism that were just inaccurate and completely avoiding anything about Islam. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that teaching the Bible in public schools is allowed as long as it doesn't cross into mandatory religious activity, which would be a violation of the First Commandment. So, in other words, you can teach about these sacred texts, but you have to do it from the perspective of history and culture, but not this is the truth with a capital T, which you have to accept. The Blue Bonnet curriculum uses stories not to teach about religion, however, but for lessons in art appreciation, math, poetry, and other subjects. For example, a 5th grade unit on the Renaissance teaches about Jesus and his disciples as part of the instruction on Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper, which is kind of ingenious in a way. The authors appear to go out of their ways to work detailed Bible lessons into the curriculum, even when they are both unnecessary and unwarranted, said a fellow named David Brockman, who is a religious studies scholar who looked at the curriculum. He said, it sort of looks like excuses to get the kids into Bible study. Other examples, in a unit teaching kindergartners how to place events in chronological order, Blue Bonnet uses the story of God establishing, essentially creating the world in 6 days, creating light on the first day and humanity on the last, as a sequencing task. This is a lot of weaving in of Christianity where it doesn't really belong, said Sharon Vane, who is a Jewish parent of 2 Texas public school graduates. The mixing of faith and fact is likely, she said, to confuse the youngest, most impressionable learners. They're not going to be able to make the distinction. They'll say, this is how the world was created, this is what we talked about in school. By the way, one of the groups most opposed to this kind of curricular plan are evangelicals. Why? Because they say, we can't trust a public school teacher to teach this stuff. What are their qualifications? What do they know? This kind of stuff is for church. And really any introduction in the schools is just going to be confusing, which I have to be honest was not what I expected to hear from evangelicals, but that is the position that they've taken. There's another unit in Blue Bonnet curriculum called Fighting for a Cause. And of the 14 sections there under, 2 focus on Esther. The others are about other historical figures, including Jackie Robinson, Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Cesar Chavez, and William Penn, all of whom have a place in any curriculum about America, but all of whom I think would be confused and a little unsure of who this Esther was that walked into the room with them, as she would be the other way around. In a section teaching the meaning of the words perish and plot, students told about Haman, who is the villain of the Esther story, who used a lottery system to determine what date to murder all of Persia's Jews. In the original draft of this lesson, students were told to roll a die to see if their number was chosen. Quote, "It feels really problematic that you would have elementary schoolers reenacting this, a parent said. You know, you wouldn't have people reenact a slave auction, or you wouldn't ask a kindergartner to pretend to be Hitler. How does this come into play? Another section told the story of how Mordecai, who is Esther's either cousin or uncle, the text really isn't clear, but a family relation of hers, could not bow down to Haman because it was prohibited by Jewish law. The truth is, it's not prohibited by Jewish law. It's a custom, it's a customary thing, but there are a number of areas where the most popular version of Bible stories, having passed through a number of cultural places, kind of lose what we know historically about what was actually going on. If you know the book of Esther, by the way, the irony here is that the rabbis 2,000 years ago didn't think the scroll of Esther should even be in the Bible. Why? Because it never once says the word God. It's a godless narrative. Now, those Jews who are religious, and I would imagine some religious Christians as well, would counter, well, God isn't mentioned, but clearly God's hand is written all over this. When Mordecai says to his niece, perhaps you were created and put here at this moment precisely so that you could save the Jewish people. That seems to be pointing to things beyond the earthly realm. By the way, Christians also appropriate the Queen Esther story. That's nothing new. Some of you may be familiar with VeggieTales. If you are of a certain vintage and age, VeggieTales was an animated cartoon series that shared biblical stories, which was kind of cute. Even there's a renewed focus on Esther for some reason. During the presidential election, for example, Christian activists invoked the story of Esther, notably at a DC rally called "A Million Women, an Esther Call to the Mall." Have you heard about that? I didn't get the invitation. It drew tens of thousands, and inspired by Esther's courage to speak up in context to the king to ask him not to rescind or try to countermand his allowing the Jews to be attacked. It had a somewhat different feel in Washington, D.C. There, they were calling upon Esther's courage as an example to speak up on modern-day issues like abortion and transgender rights. And I have a suspicion not to talk about them in support thereof. Now, I'm already at the point past the election where I've calmed down a bit, haven't broken anything in days. And I really feel that it's our job to remind ourselves of the world that we think should be and find ways that we can rededicate ourselves to getting there. Because, you know, we Leo Beck once said, "Wir Juden haben alte Augen," which is really butchered German, but what it was we Jews have old eyes. And we've seen this kind of thing before in history, and we've made it through before. And it may seem at this front end, or in the middle of this era, to be a particularly focused assault on religious rights. The truth is, we're going to have some allies along the way. We've been here before, and while it's clearly dispiriting to realize we'll have to repeat efforts to keep our schools from becoming purveyors of catechisms and dogmatic teachings, we've done it before successfully, and God willing, we will be able to do so again. And for now, we just breathe. Shabbat Shalom. I was so excited. I was thinking, God, Wes is so quiet. He must be paying attention. It's okay. He's allowed. He's allowed. We are going to conclude the service now with two prayers, the first of which is called Aleinu. It's on page 586. It's a prayer that talks about a messianic future where the unity of God will be a model for the unity of humanity. Please join us and rise if you're comfortable doing so.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
On page 598 of the prayer book, you will find the Kaddish Tome, the Mourner's Kaddish, a prayer we say, the words are in Aramaic, and they don't mention death, even though it's what we say in memory of those who have died. It's really words of gratitude about life, the gift of life, words of thanks to the source of life. We think especially this Shabbat of Uri Nisanovich, Idan Kanan, Yogev Pazi, Noam Etan, Roi Sasson, Omer Moshe Galador, Eitan Ben Ami, and Ron Epstein, who all fell. They were all members of the Israeli army who fell either in Gaza or in Lebanon over this past week. We think of others who have fallen in the various battles that are taking place around the world. We think of Bob Israel, who just passed away during this past month. The following, who have members of our congregation saying Kaddish for them, and this is the year following the death: James Yanni, Leo Weinshell, Myrna Grossman, Herb Bratt, Bill Nikud, Dick Kahn, Stan Jolton, Robin Glickstein, Bob Lieb, Ali Kravitz, Marcia Fenson, Nancy Osterman, David Hestad, Gary Sobel, Eugene Chip Alberts, Hank Borkovitz, Jonathan Frank, Stan Aronoff, Dick Kuhn, Yehuda Yanai, Bill Fox, and Marcia Reese. We think as well of the following whose yahrzeit or yearly anniversary of death falls this week: Fanny Barco, Sigmund Brachman, Maxine D. Cohn, Helen Cook, Helen Fisher, Rose Friedman, Nancy Hinden, Carol Eichen, Samuel Joseph Janis, Herbert Kahn, Marty Kravitz, Meyer Lebed, Molly Lipschultz, Arnold Miller, Lottie Neubauer, Dorothy Pollack, Morris Resnick, Abraham Schwedelson, Edward Stillman, Simon Tolkien, Marvin Wagner, Cecilia Warschauer, Richard Werner, John Wyman, George Zeidelman, and Jacob Arbit. And if there's anyone here who's mourning the recent passing of a friend or a loved one, or is observing the yahrzeit anniversary of one of those kinds of people whose name wasn't mentioned, or perhaps inadvertently mispronounced, I would ask you please to speak up and share that name with all of us so that we can join together as a community of support.
Dr. Janice Alexander.
Jonathan Brostoff. We continue with the Kaddish.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divrach chilutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imeru. Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yitparach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitvarmam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei d'kudasha b'richu. Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran me'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav. Hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen.
May the source of peace, who makes peace in the highest heavens, enable us to learn how to make peace here on earth. And may God share with those in mourning a measure of consolation and comfort. And together we say,
Amen.
Please be seated.
Shabbat Shalom. I'm Nancy Stillman, the co-chair of Women of Sinai here at Sinai. Here you go. Tonight's Oneg is sponsored by Nick and Janet Padway in honor of their grandson Wes's baby naming. Congratulations to all of you. We are grateful for the contributions made this week to our Sinai community in memory of Leo Weinschel, Dr. Marvin Wagner, Marty Kravitz, Maxine D. Cohn, Robert B. Israel, Robert T. Werner, Lottie Neubauer, John Wyman, and Helen Fisher, and in honor of Yosef Carrasco. Join us for the following upcoming programs. Join Sinai Outside for a fall trek through Lapham Peak and Kettle Moraine State Forest tomorrow. Note the location change due to the start of the hunting season. Where we were gonna go is hunting. So we picked someplace where there isn't. Meet at Sinai at 8:50 to carpool or at the Evergreen Grove parking lot at 9:45 a.m. and you can RSVP to Bobby Rector. Bring your little ones, ages 0 to 4, to Itsy Bitsy Sinai, where they will learn about Jewish customs through music and fun games. Sunday, November 24th at 9:15 a.m. at Sinai in the Itsy Bitsy room, which is here?
It is here.
Right here?
On the middle level of the school part of the building.
Okay. No, I meant, is it in this room?
Toys.
Okay. The office will be closed on Thanksgiving Day, Thursday, November 28th. Achenu, the men's spirituality group, will meet on Sunday, December 1st at 8:30 a.m. at Sinai. If you contact Mitch Colton if you're interested. Join us for a Shabbat service through the lens of social justice on Friday, December 6th at 6 p.m. at Sinai. And get excited for the Mitzvah Day Art Boutique, where you can find the perfect holiday gift for the art lover in your life. That's December 8th, 9 a.m. at Sinai. Get your monthly dose of history with Rabbi Cohn at a survey of Jewish history, Sunday, December 15th at 10 a.m., also right here. And for more information on programming, please refer to the Tuesday and Friday Sinai e-news for registration information, live stream, and Zoom links. There we go.
You know, I I'm sure many of you feel like I'm still 25 internally, even though that's really very far from being the case externally. But getting to see Ethan as a father and getting to see other members of his family here come from far and wide is really, I can't tell you how meaningful it is to see. So, good work. By the way, we're going to say a blessing over wine for the sweetness of Shabbat. The blessing is on page 123 in the prayer book, and I would ask you, please, if you're comfortable doing so, to rise.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, b'shabbat kodsho b'yava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron l'maaseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila l'mikrai kodesh, zecher yitziat Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'charta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava u'v'ratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha'shabbat l'chaim.
L'chaim. And if you would join us in the blessing over bread, the motzi.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz b'te'avon.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. And please join us inside.